All right, welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. As per usual, we will go through a couple of quick administrative slides, and then we will get into tonight's speaker. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so as always, if you are new to the club and haven't signed up with us on UContact, please do so. You can just go to ucontact.com and then go to the Sport Business Association page. That's us, and then just register as a member. That way, we'll automatically add you to our email list to get updates about all of our future meetings, as well as you will be already on that system. So hopefully, maybe next semester, but definitely next fall, we could start actually taking more trips. You'll need to be a member of UContact in order to go on those with us. So you'll already be in the system and ready to go for that. So staying up to date with SBA as usual. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns ever, you can email us at our email, which is just UConnSBA1@gmail.com. Also follow us on our socials, both on Twitter and Instagram at UConn SBA, where we'll post a lot of the same information. Just another way to kind of stay updated and stay in tune with what's going on with the club. And lastly, please check out our new YouTube channel, which is just UConn SBA on YouTube. It's where we will post the recorded versions of all of the conversations we have with speakers in case you can't make it during a meeting, but would like to watch some of that content on your own. Both of our meetings from this, one of our meetings from this year, Adam is up there, as well as some conversations we had with Doug Lanville and Dr. Joseph Cooper over the summer. So in case you missed that stuff, that content is on there as well. Next week's meeting will be sport trivia. So we're just going to take a quick break from speakers and we'll get to more of kind of a member engagement, just kind of letting everyone participate, maybe get to know each other a little bit and take a break from classes because I know it's been busy with midterms for me. So I'm sure it's the same with you. So we'll be doing sport trivia. We'll be doing it live with Kahoot. These are the different topics that we'll have: NFL, NBA, WNBA, women's national team soccer, Major League Baseball, and women's tennis. And the winner will get a $10 Dunkin' Donuts gift card. So be sure to participate and come ready. And with that, we'll kick into tonight's meeting with Marcus Lynam. So, Marcus, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you're a very busy man, so we appreciate you taking an hour out of your time to come and talk to a lot of the students and hopefully answer some questions. And we'll let everyone learn a little bit, hopefully tonight. So again, in case you're new to what's going on, Marcus and I will just kind of go through a discussion, kind of talk about a little bit about your career path, education, etc., and then we'll have time at the Q&A for everyone to ask questions, should you have them. So, Marcus, why don't I start out and just give us kind of a quick 5-minute background breakdown of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gage. Appreciate the time, and it's great to see you and see some names. But UConn grads, class of 2011. So I've been in the UConn family now for over 13 years. So it's always great to kind of get back involved. And I know this year is super unique and different, and everyone's experiencing it. But I honestly feel for you guys as college students because these are the best 4 years, and not being able to do what college kids normally do is tough. But I applaud you guys for still doing meetings like this and the Zooms and making an effort, because at the end of the day, that's what everyone's doing across the board. So it's a different year, and we're trying new things, and so kudos to you guys for what you're doing, and I appreciate the invite and happy to talk to you guys. So originally from South Carolina, decided to leave the beaches there to come up to middle of nowhere Stores. Don't know why I did that, but it ended up being a great decision. And my 4 years there, kind of coming into it, always wanted to be in sports media, wanted to do something in sports business. And as soon as I was there day one, one of my first days there, I walked up and joined UCTV. Was like, listen, I want to do sports broadcasting. I want to have my own show. I want to do this. I want to do that. And, that was, week one, freshman year. And from that point on, found my way any way possible of getting involved in sports business. And a lot of it was through UCTV, but at the time, the UConn Marketing Club, started working at the UConn Athletic Department and the media relations side with Kyle Muncy, who some of you guys might know, who's been there for a while. And then ultimately in 2009, in a journalism class, an online journalism class, we had to run a blog. That was the assignment. And I started my own UConn basketball and football blog. Started as a class project and ended up becoming a hobby. And on top of that, became pretty much a resource, for me to use as a resume, to get my writing, to get, my insights, and just kind of my will to kind of do anything and everything sports business related out there. So kind of going into my junior year, I had a few internships. Worked at the Red Sox after freshman year, worked at Boston Consulting Group in the marketing department there after my sophomore year. And then going into my junior year, between junior senior year, the summer, an opportunity came up at ESPN to work in their PR departments around the 2010 World Cup. And one of the reasons I kind of got the interview was because of my blog. They were looking for someone with skills in terms of editing and posting and running social media feeds, and kind of helping throughout, the lead up to the World Cup and then throughout the summer. And the fact that a blog that started as a project was kind of one of my entryways into ESPN was amazing. So did that and interned there for that summer. After graduation in May of 2011, they brought me back in the PR department at ESPN, kind of a project hire, publicity editor, helping run different blogs, helping with photos and videos, and kind of just doing a hodgepodge of stuff, just different things to help the group out. And I loved it. It was awesome. Got to run around Bristol, and any cool guests that came through, I was always there in the green room, able to meet them, interview them, do tours, that type of thing, behind the scenes, sit in the booths with the producers and the directors. And it was great. But ultimately I found myself, having gone to school in stores and having spent some time in West Hartford, had ultimately, I wanted to get to New York City and wanted to try something new. And an opportunity full-time that came open as a coordinator in the sports marketing group opened up in the city. And I took that in September of 2011. So moved down to the city and started in the sports marketing group, which was basically consumer marketing, a little bit of partnerships, running social feeds, just a variety of elements there in terms of, marketing, both on channel, off channel, linear, digital, social, on-site, et cetera. So did that, started off mostly focused on college basketball and golf. Coming from UConn, the college basketball background helped me there, which was great. Did 2 or 3 seasons on college hoops and helped run, the tournament challenge bracket game, worked on ESPNU, helped out with some auto racing, and then ultimately got bumped up to the NFL side. So moving on to the NFL team at ESPN, that's kind of considered the top priority, top property there, just, as it is across the board at any, media outlet or anywhere that has sports rights. So being able to be put on the team that oversees all the marketing around Monday Night Football, the NFL draft, NFL studio shows, was a great experience. And, I loved every minute of it. Spent overall 6 years at ESPN, learned a hell of a lot, met some great people, did some cool things, went to the ESPYs a few times, was at the Super Bowl, shoots with Chris Berman and those guys, meeting, whether it was the Sports Center anchors and Scott Van Pelt and all the guests that came through. It was a dream come true. I'd wanted to work there, and to kind of do the things I got to do at ESPN was amazing. Ultimately, in 2015, 2016, felt myself just kind of getting the itch, ready to try something new, something different. And a former boss at ESPN had moved over to Fox Sports. And at this time, Fox Sports was getting college football rights in terms of Big Ten, expanding their Pac-12 footprint, Big 12, and a few others. And they were growing their college football portfolio. And the team that I'm on now, the Sports Brand Partnership team, was kind of going through a reorganization. They were starting fresh, and they were looking for someone who kind of had a background in terms of owning larger events. So for me, the Monday Night Footballs and NFL draft, but also had a passion for college sports. And while I went to UConn, where football at the time was relatively big, growing up in the South, I was a diehard SEC fan. So knew a lot about the
Yep.
property. So I took it as a launch and kind of, I love ESPN. It's bittersweet to leave, but it was a great opportunity, and I really couldn't pass it up. So in June of 2016, jumped over to Fox Sports and have been there ever since. And I have to say, looking back 4.5 years later, it's probably the best decision I've made. The group at Fox Sports that I'm in, Sports Brand Partnership, is around probably 28 to 32 people. My group at ESPN was 160. So just in terms of the amount of people that you're working with, the politics of it all, the hierarchy, jumping right in, I basically, they gave me college football and they were like, hey, like, we don't know what we're doing. You seem to know more than we do, run with it. So, to kind of have that responsibility put on my plate back then and to kind of see where it's come now 4.5 years later, going into my, this is my 5th season. It's been awesome. And, the opportunity and the fact that I'm able to get in front of the Eric Shankses of the world, who's the president of Fox Sports, to have contacts on a daily and weekly basis with commissioners of the conferences to, commissioners and head people at, the NFL and the NBA, as well as the USGA and some other groups. It's been great and it's a learning experience. And we do a lot. I think the one difference between my ESPN role and my Fox Sports role is that at ESPN, I was mostly focused on the consumer, focused on, ESPN, the brand, and getting our brand out there. Where at Fox Sports, I'm the one kind of connecting Fox Sports' brand and other things. So whether that's Twitter and Facebook and working with them, or if it's working with the Big Ten and trying to connect, hey, what are you guys doing on an on-site level there that we can kind of jump into? Or even going in deeper to specifically our clients and our sponsors of games. If Budweiser wants to sponsor the Super Bowl, figuring out how to connect their brand and our brand, whether that's via TV commercials or, specific custom content that we're shooting with them, or offering up some of our talent to be involved. That's kind of what I do now, which I enjoy. So it's, I can still do the marketing side of it and come up with cool ideas and do things like that, but also the business development side and helping draw, new business into the group and, bringing new revenue into the company. That's kind of my focus at this point. But that's kind of the 5-minute background, but I feel like I've done a lot and have some good experience. But ultimately for me, my start, when I was your guys' age, was doing whatever I could to get involved, to put as much as I could on paper and volunteer and network and basically put myself out there and create my own videos, run my own blog. And at the time when I was at school is when Twitter launched, and that was 2008, 2009. Having my Twitter feed and kind of being one of the first UConn update Twitter feeds, just to going to press conferences and everything, being able to do that. At the time it was like what is Twitter? What am I tweeting? What's going on here? But ultimately that helped me land my first gig at ESPN. And when you look back on it, it's steps like that really do help. And as you build your career, it really does add up and allows you to get to bigger and better places.
Yeah, so you touched on a ton there that I kind of want to hone in on a couple of specific things. But the first one you kind of mentioned it off the bat was you got involved almost right away on campus, like day one, freshman. And I think that's a lot of things that a lot of new students are kind of apprehensive. They're like, oh, I'm a freshman, let me wait it out till like I'm maybe a junior or senior. Maybe I have a little bit more classroom experience. So kind of what was your theory behind, hey, I'm brand new to UConn. Again, don't have much experience at all, but I want to get involved. I want to be doing something. So what was your kind of thought process and how did you kind of have that confidence to do that really?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, honestly, like I said, I kind of always knew I wanted to work in sports media and sports business, and going to UConn, one of the reasons I was from far away and coming up there, one of the reasons I chose UConn at the end of the day was, ESPN was nearby, New York City was nearby, Boston was nearby, and tons of media outlets, tons of teams and, the league offices in New York. So I knew what I wanted to do, and going into, that week one, it was, doing the involvement fair and kind of walking around and seeing UCTV and hang like, hey, like, yeah, like I want to do that. And listen to, a guy give a presentation and was like, yeah, I'm in, like whatever I can do to help. And I think for me, it was a willingness to, if there was a meeting, I was there. If there was, hey, we need to do a show on a Friday night at 6:00, probably not the ideal time to give up on your social life. But at the same time, for me, it was like, yeah, I don't mind, like go shoot for an hour and then I can go drink with my friends afterwards. Like not a big so I think it was just being willing to kind of like jump in and whatever they needed. And then as I felt that, as I got started early, seeing people come in throughout the 4 years, like, hey, I'm a sophomore, hey, I'm a junior, I just now know what I want to do. And jumping in, whether it was at UCTV or whether it was in the athletic department, I had the opportunity through UCTV to work for ESPNU Campus Connection, which I don't even think they do anymore. But basically, ESPNU would pick a student at all the campuses around the country. And if there was a breaking news situation, at the time, like Jim Calhoun got sick when I was there, and they needed like, hey, what's happening with Jim Calhoun? And it was literally me going and interviewing Kimball Walker and asking them like, hey, coach is out. What do you guys think? And it's running on ESPNU that night, which is cool. But I was one of the younger kids when I was a sophomore, but I had already put in the time, and the guys who were older, who were just jumping in, they didn't know how to work a camera. They didn't know the ins and outs of editing the footage and putting it together. So for me, getting a head start, it really helped in the back end. By the time I was a junior and senior, I had all of that experience behind me and was able to kind of run the show. And if I wanted to jump in and host a show, or if I wanted to write a blog or go do a reporting or travel to a game and cover it, I had that, the background and the experience level to put me at the front. And then ultimately, by having that behind me, it allowed me to apply and really focus on my future and get like, hey, I've done X, Y, Z. What can I do next? Where some people at that point or time are just trying to figure out what is X, Y, Z. And to kind of have that experience behind me, it really, helped me, get to my next step and ultimately find my way into ESPN.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of flexibility was really key. Just like, hey, let me do this, let me learn this. May have not necessarily thought I wanted to do this, but just kind of keeping an open mind sounded like it was really important, especially early on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's little things too, like looking at what I do now, like I was not a finance major. Like I'm not a huge math fan, but at the time when I was at UCTV, having to figure out like, hey, we have $1,000 budget and we need to go shoot 3 games. What's the way we divvy this up? And, we need more money. We need to raise some more funds. What if we go out to an advertiser, who can we get involved? Oh, let's go to DPDO. DPDO could help out. We can do some signage there. At the time, I don't know what I'm doing, but looking back at it now in my role, like I'm doing similar things. Granted, it's on a much larger scale, but at the time, being able to broach the conversation with the owner of DPDO that, hey man, like we'll put you on a t-shirt if you throw us, $50-$60, like, that at the time it's like, it seems very small, but that's the thing that you really start to learn and you build off of as you take your next steps.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite memory from your time at UCTV? Something that was really cool you got to cover, or something really cool that just came up kind of randomly that you still kind of look back on?
Yeah, definitely. I at the time, and I'm not sure how UCTV is working these days, but at the time, it was really when they first started letting the kids travel, like the students travel and do things and cover it. And I remember when I was there, they got the new studio and the new desk, and we had a lot of new equipment come in. And I would say what's crazy, I was talking to someone recently. There was probably a group of 5 to 7 of us that were between 2007 and 2012 that were there. And, whether some of us graduated and people stayed, or, other people graduated and we were still there, the 5 to 7 of us that were pretty heavily involved, out of the 7, I would say 5 are at ESPN, Fox Sports, or the NBA. And the other 2 are at CBS National News and one's at CNN. So, I mean, the 7 of us that were involved and put the work in, all of us, reap the benefit of that and the rewards of it. So it was an awesome experience. I'd say probably like my number one memory was I got to go to the UConn Notre Dame football game in 2009 when it was after the Jazz Howard death, and we hadn't won a game in 2-3 weeks, and going to Notre Dame and beating Notre Dame in double overtime, being on the field for that, that was awesome. That was incredible. And
crazy.
I would say my senior year was the Kimball Walker year when we won the championship, and just kind of being in and out of the program. And I was also the media relations intern during that run. So getting a backseat view of kind of everything that's happening with Kimba, and, Shabazz was a freshman, and all these guys, like, being involved in the program and seeing that development, having a front seat to Coach Calhoun and what was happening there was awesome. And I turned down the opportunity to go cover the Final Four, to stay on campus and watch it with my friends and enjoy it, and go to Huskies and go to Ted's and to watch and enjoy the games. And I don't change it for the world. It was awesome. But the build up and kind of the whole atmosphere around us, being in the Final Four and then ultimately winning the championship was definitely, one of my top memories.
Yeah, definitely a memory that a lot of us right now are hoping we'll see soon,
Yeah.
because everyone here on campus has not been able to experience that in a while. So
Yeah, I mean, what was
fingers
it,
crossed.
2014? So yeah, we're due. We're due at this point. So back in the Big East, and yeah, it's honestly like, for me working at Fox. So Fox has Big East rights, and I work on our college property, so college basketball falls under me. So I've been in tons of meetings with the Big East and strategy, just in terms of, hey, how many UConn games do we want on Tuesdays or Mondays, or what's the best we can do. This is all talking hypothetical at this point, but when the Big East tournament has fans again and having UConn back involved, like they're having to figure out like the amount of UConn fans that are going to go to those games. Like they're having to strategize now, like what does that look like in terms of ticket allotment, sponsorships, everything. So being involved in those conversations from my side now is pretty awesome to kind of see it full circle. But yeah, I mean, for this season, all your UConn Big East games will be on Fox or FS1. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So you were a journalism major when you were here at UConn, and you've already kind of talked about some of the extracurricular stuff that was important. Was there any big takeaways or key classes that you took kind of on that academic side that you really learned something that you find very useful or you used a lot kind of in your career now? Or was there not anything really?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm hesitant to say some of this just because like academics are 100% important, and like, doing as much as you can and getting a 4.0, like that's so important for me at the time. And, when I was kind of trying to find my way into the world of sports biz, the conversation was like, it's not what you have learned and what your GPA is, because everyone learns stuff and everyone's GPAs are decent.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like, what can you put on paper? Like, what have you done? And for me, it was all about getting as much experience as possible. So especially my senior year, I would say I focused more on, volunteering at events and helping the men's basketball program out, or doing something for UCTV. And, if there's ESPN, if ESPN needed anything, I jumped on that. And like, if I had a test the next day, I did my best. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was making those contacts and networking and putting myself in a position to learn something on a like hands-on, like what am I actually doing tangibly, versus a classroom. With that said, I did learn a lot. And like I said at the beginning, the online journalism class that I took and starting the blog and kind of how that works, and learning the internet and learning Twitter and that class, Rick Hancock was the teacher who he now works at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and is one of their like head digital folks there. And he was the professor of the class, and him and I still stay in contact because that class literally helped me get a job. Like I started a blog because of that class, and it helped, give me an opportunity. So I would say that class was definitely interesting. I was a comm double major. So I took advertising and I took marketing. And then in terms of like sports specifically, there was only like one, like I wasn't in the NEAG school as a sports management major. So I only, joined special conversations and, extracurricular activities through that program. But a lot of what they did obviously was interesting, and I helped out, and if they had it open to non-sports management majors, I would join. But yeah, I would say, the online journalism class was interesting, and then taking like an advertising and marketing class was helpful. But also depends on like what you're interested in doing. Looking back at it now, why I wasn't really into the math side, I wish I took a finance class of some kind. Like I took Econ 101 or whatever it is now, but getting a little more background on the financial side, and now that I work on the sales side in some capacity, learning those ropes would have been beneficial a little bit too. But yeah, for me it was all about experience. I think at the end of the day, everyone can throw a 3.8 3.9 GPA on a piece of paper, and you graduate and you take classes, and that's awesome. Like that's a big part of it. But when it comes down to the end of the day and you're comparing two resumes, whoever has more experience and can talk about, hey, I did this, I had hands-on experience doing that, it goes a long way when you're going through the hiring process.
Yeah, I think that hands-on experience is definitely a common thread we're starting to see, especially in the sport industry. Because like you said, pretty much everyone can throw that 3.8 or 3.9 on the paper. It's like, hey, what have you actually done though outside of the classroom, kind of putting in your time?
Absolutely.
So definitely something to highlight. You already talked about you after spending 6 years at ESPN, you moved to Fox Sports. So was there a big difference in company culture? Like, was it just a totally different way things operated, different feeling in the building, different way you interact with people? Or was it pretty much like a, hey, this is pretty much the same. I'm just in a different role and there's a different logo?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that it's funny, especially in the sports business world, you realize pretty quickly it's not that big,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of overlap, and people all know each other. And if I was at ESPN, someone else was at CBS, and now we're working together at Fox, and they leave Fox and they go to NBC, and oh, I was at the NBA. Oh, I know someone at the Major League Baseball. Everyone's pretty intertwined some way or another. So when I went to Fox, I was hired by a former ESPN boss, and I would say Fox Sports as a whole, I would say it's probably 25 to 35% former ESPN employees in some capacity, and that's across all departments. So that's marketing, production, research, sales. People have been involved at both networks, and for me, I think the biggest difference was, ESPN is such a behemoth, and as they started it all back in 1979, and they were the sports network, and it was, for me, that's the network I grew up watching, and I'm sure all of you guys do as well. It's, that's what you grow up as a kid, putting SportsCenter on, and watching Scott Van Pelt or whatever it might be, and to kind of get there, at 22, it's like, oh man, like this is my dream job, and I'm here. To kind of go through that process and then see everything behind the curtain. And it was, while ESPN's a great company, it's owned by Disney. There's a lot of hierarchy. It's a massive company, close to 8,000 global employees. I would just say that the breadth of kind of how many people are involved to get decisions done, to get things moving along is huge. When I
Hmm.
went to Fox, I realized, like I said, my department now is 28 to 30 of us. At ESPN, it was 150, 160. So, my team, while my individual team, my sport team, I'm a group of, I would say 4 or 5. And at ESPN, it was in the same way, but that group of 4 or 5 reported to another group of 4 or 5. And we're at Fox, I'm a director level. My VP and my, senior vice president, they have a direct line to Eric Shanks, who is the president of the entire company. So
Hmm.
I think for us, it's just a smaller family style feel. It's easier to get things done, just in terms of there's not so many levels of approval you have to go through. Um, if for me, like I've been in my 6 years at ESPN, at the time, George Bodenheimer and Skipper were the presidents of ESPN. I would say maybe 5, 6 times total I was in a room with them in terms of kind of being in a meeting. And I've been at Fox now for 4.5 years, and I've been with Eric Shanks and had dinner with him and been in meetings with him 30, 40 times. So I
Hmm.
think it's just the level and hierarchy, and just kind of being more open to like, hey, like if you're working on this and you know what you're doing, the trust of being able to put you in a room to talk to the SVP, or to talk to, the president of the company, or, like I said, I've been in the rooms with the commissioner of the NFL. I've been in rooms with people from Major League Baseball at high up, and to be in these strategy meetings, to be at my age, at my level, to be counted on, not even allowed in, but to be counted on to provide information and to be a key figure to help move things along. At ESPN, that wouldn't be possible. And not that it's a bad thing.
Yep.
It's just there's so many other people involved. Where at Fox, it's lean and mean, and whatever we got to do to get it done, we get it done. That there's just really good people at both places, and that I would say at ESPN, I'm still really close with 5, 6, 7 people that I was worked with there for 6 years, and I still see them and talk to them all the time. And at Fox, when you travel with people to games and you're going to meetings and you're doing all of this, like you become super close. So I mean, I would say tons of good friends, on my career side, just because you're doing so much with them. And but both ESPN and Fox, they make it a choice that the culture, being able to get along with people, like you're in the trenches with them doing, you're at games at, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, and you need to get something done, like being able to trust the person next to you and have a relationship with them is important. So for us, whether it's a happy hour or, just meetings and just team bonding and, knowing each other's families and like what's going on and staying in contact, like that's super important. And both Fox and ESPN have, like, my time there, we've done a great job of kind of focusing on that. So culture is super important. And, that's one of the reasons people get into the sports business is it's great people that think alike, that want to do cool shit and have some fun. So it's definitely a good culture environment.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to highlight, especially about ESPN and how massive of a company it is. Because I think a lot of people, because we've had alumni that have gone to ESPN that we're still close to, and I mentioned a lot of that same stuff. And I think a lot of younger students coming up, like you said, kind of idolize ESPN. It's kind of it's called the golden goose, like it's the epitome of sport media, and they don't recognize that it's such a huge company that there are. I'd say those good or bad, but there are those cultural implications and those kind of structural implications because of that. And if you go to a smaller company like Fox Sports, that you may not necessarily be present. So it's kind of all about what you're looking for and what you kind of function best in. So
Yeah,
appreciate that point.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And there's tons of companies out there like that, not just in sports business. So the Amazons, the Googles, et cetera, they're the same way. Like they are who they are for a reason. And, it's not a bad thing. It's just there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of people involved, and that's just kind of how it is. And, the Fox Sports and NBC Sports, CBS, and, some of the other platforms, Bleacher Report, et cetera, a lot of these people have come from ESPN or similar backgrounds. And, being in a room with these folks, you realize the level of smarts and the excitement and the culture. It's very similar to ESPN. It's just the size and breadth of knowledge that ESPN has and the amount of people that they have involved. It's definitely bigger than the others.
yeah. So this next, I kind of want to know a little bit more about branding. So I know that's a lot more what you're doing about for Fox Sports right now. So my question is how important in your line of work and what you're doing when you're working with these brands, how important is it for you to be like very familiar with the brands you're working with? Or how does it ever come up? Are you an ad, like you mentioned the example of Budweiser, for instance, if you're trying to do an ad deal or branding partnership with Budweiser, is it ever important for you to be a really avid consumer of Budweiser and know their product lines personally? Or does that not really come up and you can just kind of be a professional and still do these jobs without necessarily being a personal fan of all these brands?
No, it's another good question. I would say that if you have a background and, specifically looking at advertisers and, other brands, having a background and knowing like what they do, like definitely helpful. Like that goes a long way. And if you can speak to things that they've done in the past and, if you're talking about Bud Light and like, oh, the Dilly Dilly campaign and, the kind of talking of stuff that they've done and in terms of not only like, the advertising, but just different, moments that they've been involved in and that type of thing, having that background, definitely helpful. In some cases though, like not knowing the product is also helpful because as we're kind of coming up with ideas and ultimately these brands want people to buy their product or be involved with them. If I don't know them or if I'm not as familiar with them, I might be someone that they would want to target. So for me, what would get me to be interested? And I think that's something that we take into meetings also. So, I worked on a big deal for Peloton probably 3 years ago. And at the time, this is right when Peloton was kind of starting. And like I had heard of it, but, wasn't a consumer, wasn't a big fan, didn't know much about it. And we looked at it as, what would want me to buy a Peloton? Like, I don't know anything about it. Convince me to buy a Peloton. So, working with them on, here's their key branding, what, the key buzzwords that they want to hit, but also like, what events they want to be around, what's the timing for them? For them, it was like, oh, we want to be around Black Friday, around Thanksgiving. And, instead of buying your wife that gift, jewelry, buy her a Peloton instead. And getting involved with that and kind of being on the side of like, hey, like convince me to do that. Why should I buy my wife Peloton? Going into meetings like that, that's also helpful. So it's a give and take, but I mean, anytime you have background knowledge, people that you're in meetings with, they can pick up on that pretty quickly. It goes a long way just because they know your brand, they know you're not bullshitting them. That does help, but in some cases not knowing and being open and honest about that. I mean, that's the other thing. Like if you go in like, oh, I know your product totally. And like, you really don't, and you're just BSing and you're telling people things that you think they want to hear. Most people will see right through that. But if you go in and you're open, like, listen, never heard of your product before. I don't know what I'm doing, but as someone who's not a consumer currently, this is what I'm thinking. Being open and honest about it, most brands appreciate that.
Staying with the kind of the branding thing, you talked a lot about now that Fox Sports, you're working with a lot of different college football properties, a lot of different different of the conferences. So what has it been like specifically these last 6-8 months with all the chaos surrounding COVID-19? I mean, we had the Big Ten canceling and then restarting. We've had games postponed, games moved, different programs shutting down and then restarting. Like, what is been like in your job and from a branding perspective, trying to sort through all this different noise and actually trying to create like a consistent product or a consistent package for these partners here?
Yeah, it's I have to say probably the strangest situation that we've ever gone through. Specifically college football. We're in meetings every day about the NFL side and MLB playoffs and NASCAR when that was on, and you kind of see what people were doing. And eventually, and like you look at NBA and NHL, they did the bubble situation. They started, got through it, great. College football has been the one where there's no governing body, there's no commissioner of everything to really make a decision. So everyone's kind of on their own island, and the chaos that has created has been honestly insane. So for us, I mean, we had big plans kind of starting in February, and for us, we really, after the season ends for us in December, we moved pretty quickly getting into the next season to try to get things moving. And hey, what changes are we making? What's our big setup this year? For us, our big new kickoff pregame show, which is competing with College Game Day. And last year, we actually beat Game Day in a few episodes. Our big plan this year was to take the show on the road. We were going to, go to 6 or 7 of our key sites, continuing to build the brand. We had already talked to 6, 7, 8 sponsors who were like, I want to be involved. You have Reggie Bush, you have Urban Meyer, Matt Leinart, Brady Quinn, doing some of those guys, like, can't wait to be involved. So you do all this legwork, you get everything ready to go, and then March happens. And at that time, it's kind of like, all right, like, it's only March. We have plenty of time, not a big deal. We'll wait and see what happens. And then slowly but surely, as COVID has continued, you get into June and July and you're asking for questions. And for us, the networks usually do the draft of games, like what games we're going to have. That usually happens at the end of May. And coming into May, we still didn't have a schedule, and the leagues really didn't know what they were doing. So it's like, all right, we'll readdress at the beginning of July. July comes around, we're in daily calls with Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, and other folks, Larry Scott of the Pac-12 and a few others. And you're hearing, hey, like, we're good, we're going to move forward, that's the plan, but we're just going to wait as long as we can until we have to make a decision. So, and while that's frustrating for us, at the same time, we understood that, because it's like, if you don't need to make a decision right now, don't, because you can wait and get more information and things might change. So as we've kind of did that, and we got all the way to August, and it's like, all right, we're going to play. Here's the schedule. We're good. We drafted all the games, with ESPN, and then boom, the news comes out. Big Ten's going to pull back. Pac-12 is going to follow. In the full season, honestly, and this is something that we've talked about a lot, the reason we have college football right now is because of the Big 12. The Big 12 was the swing conference out of the Power 5. That if they would have gone with the Pac-12 and Big Ten, have been like, yeah, we're going to pack it in, we're going to go, then the ACC probably would have followed pretty quickly.
Those dominoes would have fell.
Yeah, and the SEC would have been like, okay, we had even heard that the SEC was super close to pulling the plug. They were ready to do it, but the Big 12 was the one like, honestly, like, we think we can play. We're gonna move ahead. Like, if we need to push the start date back, that's fine. If we need to, make some changes, change the schedule up, that's okay. But we're not going to cancel. And I think for us, that was super appreciated, just because it's like, you don't need to cancel at that moment. You can push it back and we can figure out a solve. And ultimately, that the Big 12 doing that allowed the SEC and ACC to say, hell, we're going to play. We're good. We're going to move forward. We're going to change some things around, but we're going to continue to play. So as that has happened, then the Big 10 and Pac-12 now look like the idiots who had backed out, and now they're coming back. But in terms of kind of our job and like our day to day, we had everyone set up for the season, and then this happens. And at that point, when the Big Ten's like, oh, I'm out, Pac-12 out, for us, it's, scramble mode of like trying to keep everyone who has been involved, who has said they're going to be involved, to stay. And you try to make deals like, hey, we'll move your money over to NFL, move it to baseball playoffs, leave as much as you can with us for Big 12, and we'll figure out the back end. We'll make it good in 2021. And I would say out of the, companies that were in initially, maybe 30% stayed. So, I mean, we lost a lot there. And, not everyone left Fox completely. Some moved over to the NFL or baseball and such. But, at that time, it's a punch in the gut. It sucks. You work so hard for 6-7 months, and to kind of have it, taken out from underneath you, it's a tough situation. So kind of when that happened in August through when we got the season started, in early September. And then you start hearing the rumblings again, like, oh, Big Ten wants back in, Pac-12 wants back in. So then the whole process of going through a draft with ESPN and getting game counts and affiliates and working with everything to, okay, how are we going to put this all together in a short time period? That's what we've been dealing with for the last month. And it's a good thing. I don't mind, because that means more football is being played. So, and, you know, for us, just being able to have that content to put on our air is huge. So, you know, that's been a great situation, and it's a lot going on. It's a chaos and total chaos. And, you know, the Big Ten comes back next weekend, 10/24. We start with Ohio State, Nebraska on our air at noon. And, you know, that for us, it's a big deal. And we're seeing now a lot of people are starting to ask questions and kind of come back involved. But, I mean, we're going to be working throughout the rest of the year to try to bring out as much money as we can from what we lost back in August. So, but great question. Total chaos. It's been a weird year, just like everything else. But, yeah, hopefully college football can get through the next few months, and 2021 will be back to normal.
So I know we're kind of getting a little closer here to the end, so I want to maybe do a couple more like kind of general advice questions, and then we'll kick it to a Q&A. So that the first one I have is, was there a either earlier in your career or maybe kind of wrapping up in college, was there a specific habit or skill that you found like really, really crucial that you have just kept with, stayed with, and it's just you are using it almost every day, and it has just been kind of a big component to what the success you've achieved so far?
Man, it's a good question.
And then, not to interrupt, but and then on the flip side of that, has there maybe been one you really had a bad habit you had to break, or a skill that you found was just not very useful when you thought it was going to be important, and you kind of just realized you kind of had to kick it by the wayside and focus on other things?
Yeah, good question. I would say the trait that I've always kind of felt that has helped me is being, and this is very cliche, but like being a people person. So being able to connect with different folks at different levels, doing different things. You know, one of the, like when I'm interviewing someone, I always talk about, like, you know, can you get along with different people? Because it's one thing to get along with someone that's like you, but you're working with so many different people that are doing a variety of things, and they're different ages, they're different races, they come from different places. You know, and it's, you know, being able to talk to the 65-year-old producer who's wearing New Balances and dad jeans, and then talking to the 24-year-old media buyer, you know, wearing skinny jeans in New York, and you have to wear two different hats and be able to talk to both of them.
Yep.
So I think for me, being able to kind of, you know, familiarize myself with different folks and different ways that people work, and that started, you know, at UConn too. You know, seeing how the basketball team and how Jim Calhoun, you know, ran his property. Like how that works and how his team was run, and realizing, you know, hey, I should keep my mouth shut and not say anything ever. Or, you know, at UCTV or other places, like they want to hear my opinion. They want to see me get involved. And that kind of leads into the second part of your question of what's one thing that I've kind of learned to do better at. And I mean, continuing to get better at this, because no one's perfect. And, you know, I definitely need to improve, but knowing when to jump in and knowing when to take a backseat. It's, you know, there's a lot of alphas in sports. You know, most people played sports, and, you know, you're the team captains and all of that. So there's a lot of people who want to have their voice heard, that want to be involved, and it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's just realizing the moments where it makes sense to take a step back, let other people kind of run it and organize it. And the moments where, you know, it's probably best if I say something at this point. It's probably best if I take the lead and start organizing. And I think, you know, finding that balance of knowing when to jump in, when not to jump in, is super, super important, because as you work with, you know, different bosses, and, you know, everyone has a different management style. You know, some bosses want you to take the lead and run with everything, or other bosses, they want to run with everything and just use you when they need you. So being able to kind of figure that out, to know when to jump in, when not to jump in. So I would say just kind of, you know, being a people person, being able to get along with different folks, being open, being, you know, completely open to people's different thoughts, opinions, everything, super helpful. And then ultimately kind of reading the room and knowing what's the best time to say something, what's the best time to take a back seat, is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, especially like you said, in the sport industry. A lot of us come from athletic background, team captains, and want to always speak up, but kind of realize, at least that's something I've experienced, is like, hey, know when you're supposed to, not when you're supposed to, but when is best to speak and when is not to. Definitely understanding and reading that room.
Yeah.
So,
as someone put it to me when I was at ESPN one day, you know, a lot of people can talk their way into a job. A lot of people can talk their way out of a job too. So,
yep.
You know, saying something isn't always the best thing to do. So at some points in time, keeping your mouth shut and just, learning to listen more is definitely helpful.
That's a great way to put it. So with these last couple minutes here, I'll kick it open to questions anyone in the group has. You can either unmute yourself, unmute your video, ask it live, or if you prefer just to type it in the chat, I can read it aloud, whatever is more convenient to y'all. I'll give you a minute or two to kind of have that open.
I could start off with the questions. What's up, Marcus? I'm a sophomore. I'm the marketing officer for SBA, so
Cool.
I definitely have an interest in working in sports marketing, so I appreciate hearing your experience. And Gage already kind of touched on this with his questions, but I guess I'd just ask, like, what do you think was like most important to distinguish yourself to employers and kind of like really break into the industry in like a full-time position, and like how can you best market yourself as an applicant?
Yeah, good question, Frank. Like I said, for me, it's all about experience, being able to put something on your resume. So if that's volunteering at your local minor league baseball team, if that's helping, at UConn athletic department, whatever it might be, getting some kind of experience is always going to be helpful. The second thing is also knowing the sports. Once you start getting into applying for jobs and having those conversations with employers in the sports world, like having a knowledge of what's happening in the sports world. And I'm not talking like what's happening on the field. I'm talking about the business side. So knowing like, oh, the rights deal, like NFL rights, that's coming up in the next year or two. That's a big discussion across all the networks. And, the other leagues are even looking at that to see like, hey, what's the NFL going to get for their rights packages, and how much is that going to affect us on the back end? So, reading Sports Business Daily and, following, the as much as a weirdo as he is, the Darren Rovell's and, the other folks on Twitter and such, just kind of learning the business as a whole, getting as much information as that as possible, networking with folks, whether you're in. My biggest advice in general is don't ask people for jobs. Don't ask people for internships. Ask people for advice. Ask people, hey, like, would you mind looking at my resume? Any updates or any feedback you might have? That goes a long way, because the amount of, LinkedIn requests I get on a daily basis, and just like everyone else does, of like, hey man, like I want to work at Fox Sports. Can I have a job? There's just so many of those that you just have to ignore it. So for me, the kids that I like responding to and that I like helping are the ones like, hey, like I'm a junior. I know I want to do something. I don't know what, but just any advice would be helpful. That's when I'm always willing to jump in and help. So, kind of recapping, I would say getting some experience of some kind, learning the business as a whole. And when you're in conversations with people in the business, being able to speak to that. So, whether it's rights deals or, what's going on just in terms of acquisitions or, mergers, just kind of knowing all of that background is super, super helpful. And when you can speak about it, the interviewer usually sees that as like, oh, they are involved more than just, oh, I'm a Lakers fan or I'm a Yankees fan. So that's something to keep in mind. And then ultimately when you're asking and involved and trying to, get a foot in the door, using, hey, I'd like some advice. I just want to run something by you, instead of asking, hey, I want a job, I want an internship. So that'd be my best advice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Just quickly following up on that, Marcus, we got a question related to that. Jason, Mike isn't working, but he wanted to ask, how do you communicate and connect with others in the sport and industry? And I think kind of following up on what you already talked about with networking, but how do you stay in touch with those individuals? What kind of navigating? How do you kind of keep up on those connections and not let them kind of fall by the wayside, I guess, so to speak, as you kind of separate?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it's building relationships with people. So, whether my time at ESPN, you're there for 6 years, like, you're there, I was there longer than I was at UConn. So like you're building, long-term relationships with these people. And then just, staying in touch, and whether that's, through social media and you're following them on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, or just staying, personal text messages here and there. My VP at ESPN, who it kind of runs the NFL and runs the SportsCenter side there now, him and I still text. I haven't worked for him in over 4 years, but he'll check in on me like, hey, how's your wife, or what's going on with you this weekend? Oh, your Braves are back in the playoffs, like something like that. And for me, like, he's a big Michigan fan. It's like, oh, you know, your blue did this or something. So just staying in contact here and there. I think people more around my age and kind of, you know, at the same level, it's if we're all at different places. And I would say, you know, at ESPN, the group that I was in, so many people have gone to Twitter, Google, to Players Tribune, to Bleacher Report, kind of all over, that we're all over the place at this point, that staying in contact and like, hey, I saw, you know, Bleacher Report did this. That's really cool. Like, what's the insight on that? And I think, you know, as you're in the business more and more, you create these contacts, and, you know, and they become friends, honestly. And it's just checking in on them and, you know, updating them like, hey man, like I did this cool thing with Wendy's and Twitter for college football this weekend. Check it out. And, you know, them kind of sending me the links and just, you know, staying in contact that way. So it's super important though, because it's, you know, the day comes that you're looking for a new job, or, you know, heaven forbid someone gets laid off and needs some help. Being able to recall some of these folks that you've worked with in the past, and you know what they do, and, you know, be involved in it is definitely helpful.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Mark, can you tell us about the time you met Aaron Andrews?
That's a good question, Matt. Matt is a friend of mine who wants to get into sports biz, so he wants to join the conversation also. Aaron Andrews, yeah. When I was an intern at ESPN, the PR department, they came in and did their new headshots. All the talent would come into the department and get their headshots done. And as an intern, I'm like, oh, cool, that's Aaron Andrews. And the photographer who was messing with me was like, oh yeah, just go ask her for like a picture. And I did that, not knowing that they were messing with me. And the head of the group saw the interaction and like freaked out at me. Like, what are you doing? You don't ask talent for photos. Like, oh my God, what are you doing? And like literally belittled me in front of like 10 people. And I was a 20-year-old intern. And then everyone else felt bad because like, oh, we were messing with him. It wasn't his fault. But Aaron Andrews literally like laughed in my face, thought it was hilarious. So that was my Aaron Andrews story. Great question, Matt.
Thanks for sharing, Marcus. We appreciate it.
Hi, Marcus. Thank you for joining us today. I'm a coordinator for the sports business conference that our club puts on. I know I want to work in sports, but I'm not really sure what direction I want to take it. So I was just curious, like, what's your favorite part about your job, and what makes you want to go to work every day?
Good question. Yeah, a lot of people are in your exact position. Like, hey, like I like sports. I want to do something in there, but what exactly that looks like, TBD. I think for me, it's working with so many different people. So like I said, you know, that's part of why I think I've done well, is because I'm able to communicate with the 60-year-old producer who's old and has, you know, grandkids at this point, but also being able to connect with the 24-year-old who just graduated college and is the media buyer representation for Coca-Cola. And I think for me, it's just, you're working with so many different people. I also love the fact that, like, you know, we're working on the biggest events, you know, at Fox. You know, we have the Super Bowl, we have the World Series, we have the best NFL package. We've got, you know, 3 of the top 5 power conferences in college football. We got the Big East in college basketball. You know, we had USGA golf. You know, being able to work on these premier events, like, that's something you can't really replicate. And, you know, I love the fact that, you know, if I'm working on something Monday to Thursday, you know, that Saturday, you know, we're going to run it and it's going to air in front of millions of people. It's pretty cool to see kind of it all come to life. But yeah, I mean, just, you get to work with different folks. It's a good mix of like ideating and just throwing ideas off the wall and that type of thing, while also the strategy behind it. It's like, you know, why are we going to focus our efforts around Big 10 versus Big 12? Or, you know, why does UConn need to air on Mondays and Tuesdays versus Wednesday, Thursdays? And like getting involved at that level is always just super interesting. So that's kind of what I enjoy most. But I mean, for individuals, and, you know, it's ultimately down to what do you enjoy? And, you know, for some people, that's being involved in the production itself. And, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be talent, I want to be on TV. And while that's great, and some people it does happen for them, you know, 90% of the time, you're not going to end up there. So it's figuring out, like, hey, I like being involved in the creative process, and whether that's being a director, a producer, you know, being someone who works on the social side even and creates social content and shows that live on digital. A lot of folks do stuff there, and, you know, that's huge. So it's just figuring out what exactly you want to get into. But yeah, for me, it's being able to work with, you know, a variety of different people, being involved in like the biggest events, and then, you know, the combination of strategy and being creative.
Thanks, Jake. I know we're coming up on 7 o'clock. Are there any other questions anyone wants to ask either over the Zoom or in the chat? No?
Cool. Well, I mean, if you guys have more questions, Gage, you have my email. Definitely let people know. You can follow me on LinkedIn and hit me up there if you want. Happy to talk to you guys individually if needed. My overall advice and kind of parting words, just keep doing what you're doing. This is where it all starts. And while meetings like this and volunteering at a lacrosse game or a men's soccer game or something seems trivial, at the same time, being able to put that on your resume and add it all up, it really does help you take that next step. So, but yeah, if you guys have more questions, happy to help. And as a UConn grad, I put you guys a little bit above anyone else that reaches out. So, happy to help, guys, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Marcus. I know I really enjoyed it and appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else in SBA does. So have a great night. Enjoy Tuesday night football, which is something never said before. I don't know if I'll ever say again, but everyone else, have a great night. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.